The probe died on a Tuesday. Officer Rylan Ash didn't notice for 11 minutes because he was eating lunch and because probes died all the time out in the outer dark. Clipped by debris, cooked by radiation, simply worn out from the loneliness of watching nothing for decades. He logged it as equipment failure, reached for another bite. Then the backup probe sent its first reading. Rylan put the food down. The backup was registering contacts. Ship contacts. The number was climbing. 40, 60, 120, and it kept going up. Rylan sat very still and watched because in 17 years of monitoring the outer dark, he had never seen anything come from that direction. Nothing lived out there. Nothing had ever lived out there. The counter hit 1,000. The probe's display ran out of room for digits. Rylan pressed the emergency channel with one hand. With the other, he pushed his food away. He wasn't hungry anymore. 12 hours later, in a corridor 3 systems away, Chancellor Draven Cross of the Keth Dominion made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Send the 7th Armada," he said. "I want to know what they are." The 7th Armada was 41 ships, not the full Keth force. Draven was careful about not appearing alarmed, but more than enough to stop a convoy and demand answers. 41 warships in tight formation was a message. It said, "We are the authority in this part of space, and you will identify yourselves." They moved to intercept in the Share corridor, a narrow band of navigable space between 2 thick asteroid fields, a smart place to force contact. The unknown fleet would have to slow or change course or, at minimum, acknowledge. Commander Victor Thane commanded the lead ship, 53 years old, 28 years of service. He had stopped merchant convoys, suppressed colony rebellions, enforced Dominion law across 14 systems. This was routine work. Identify the ships. Take them into custody if they refuse to cooperate. Return to base. The instruments showed a single contact ahead. One ship. Victor almost laughed. The initial reports had said thousands, but here in the corridor, there was just one. Medium-sized, no obvious weapons visible on its hull. Not running, not signaling, just holding position in the exact center of the navigable channel, waiting. "Hail them," Victor said. They hailed on every standard frequency, in every major language, in the old trade tongue that even dead civilizations had used, in mathematical pulses that any spacefaring species should recognize. Nothing. The ship sat in the corridor, patient, still. Victor felt something small and cold touch the base of his spine. He had felt it only twice before in 28 years. Both times people had died. He pushed it away. "All ships," he said, "battle formation, weapons hot. If they don't respond in 60 seconds, we fire across their bow." 41 warships slid into attack pattern, the kind of formation that had broken colony defenses and scattered pirate fleets, overlapping fields of fire. No escape vectors, absolute dominance. The unknown ship did not move. 60 seconds passed. "Fire," Victor said. 6 ships opened up. Warning shots, precisely calculated to pass within 500 meters of the unknown vessel's hull. Energy weapons that would light up their sensors and make the message unmistakable: you are outgunned, outmanned, and out of options. The beams hit nothing but empty space, and the unknown ship spoke for the first time. Not on the communication channels, on every single display screen across all 41 warships simultaneously. Text only, no voice, no visual. Just words in a dialect so old that Victor's translation system needed 4 seconds to process it. "You chose to fire first. Please remember that." Victor's hands went very still on his command console. "All ships," he said quietly. "Prepare for..." The lights went out, not just on his ship, on all 41 ships at once. Every system, every backup, every emergency protocol. The kind of synchronized failure that should have been impossible because each vessel had independent power cores and triple redundant safety systems. 12 minutes and 17 seconds of absolute darkness. When the lights came back on, Victor was standing in a room he didn't recognize. White walls, soft lighting, a table with 2 chairs, and a woman sitting across from him. She was human, or something very close to it. 40-something, calm. She had dark hair pulled back and eyes that had seen things Victor couldn't begin to imagine. "My name is Admiral Saren Vale," she said. "Your crew is unharmed. They are in similar rooms on similar ships. You will all be returned to Keth space in 72 hours. Victor tried to speak. His throat was dry. "Where are my ships?" he managed. "In our possession," Saren said. She stood and walked to the wall. Pressed something. The wall became transparent. Victor saw his fleet, 41 warships, drifting in perfect formation. Dead, not destroyed, not damaged, just empty, hollow. Like the space between stars had reached inside them and pulled out everything that made them work. Surrounding them were 18 other ships, different designs, unfamiliar configurations. They had been there the whole time, hidden in the asteroid field, watching. "We have been watching you for 300 years, Saren said. She said it the way someone states a fact about the weather. Not proudly, not threateningly, just cleanly. "Did you think we came unprepared?" Victor sat down slowly in the chair. His legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "What are you?" he whispered. Saren looked at him for a long moment. "We are the ones your people tried to erase," she said. "We are the ones who kept records." She placed a small device on the table between them. It projected a hologram. Numbers, columns, dates, names. "This is not revenge," she said. "This is accounting." The hologram showed Victor's name, his ships, the date, the time, the coordinates, every detail of the last 12 minutes and 17 seconds. Filed, categorized, added to a much longer list that stretched back further than Victor could read. "Your account," Saren said, "is far from settled." The transmission reached the Galactic Council's monitoring station 4 hours later. Not from the 7th Armada, from the Keth Dominion's home system, where panic was beginning to set in because 41 warships had simply stopped reporting. No debris field, no emergency signals, no final transmissions, just silence. Clean, complete, like someone had closed a door. The council chamber of the Galactic Assembly sat on a neutral station at the center of 5 trade routes. Chosen 3 centuries ago because it was equidistant from most of the major species and offensive to none of them. It was a practical building, not beautiful, the kind of place where decisions happened because decisions had to happen somewhere. Delegate Oren Vassar had sat in this room for 9 years. He represented the Interstellar Coalition, small worlds, minor species, the kind of political group that mostly existed to fill seats and dilute votes. He was good at his job because he was careful. He had spent 9 years watching larger powers do what they wanted and learning to live with it. He was not living with what he was looking at now. The main display showed a trajectory line. Clean, straight, starting from the outer dark and cutting directly toward a specific patch of space. A small, unremarkable system called Valkyrie, home to a gentle species that grew medicines and kept records, and had spent most of the last 3 centuries trying to recover from what the Keth Dominion had taken from them. The line did not curve. It did not slow. It did not search. It went directly to Valkyrie space the way a hand goes to a scar it has touched 1,000 times in the dark. "How many ships?" Oren asked. The analyst at the board hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. "We stopped counting at 4,000, she said. "The instruments aren't built to handle—" She stopped. Started again. "We have never needed them to handle numbers like this." 4,000. The largest fleet action in recorded galactic history had used 312 ships. That was the Keth Dominion's campaign against the Moore Collective 60 years ago. A war that had lasted 8 months and reshaped 24 systems. This was 4,000 and counting. "Who are they?" said a voice from across the chamber. Nobody answered. "Who are they?" the voice said again, louder, with the frustration of someone who was used to being answered immediately. That was Chancellor Drevin Cross of the Keth Dominion. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of figure that filled a room without trying. He had been chancellor for 20 years. He had never met a question that didn't eventually answer itself to his satisfaction. He did not like this question. "Hail them," he said. They hailed them, on every standard frequency, in every major language, in the old trade tongue, in mathematical pulses. Nothing. The fleet moved on its heading, patient, unhurried, like a tide that did not care about the shore's opinion. "Equipment malfunction on their end," Drevin said. "Tarston, or migration convoy, a generation ship group. Send a physical intercept and find out what they are." Oren looked at the trajectory again. He looked at where the line ended. "They are going to Valkyrie space," he said. "I can see that," Drevin said. "Do we know why?" Nobody answered. Oren sat with that silence for a long time. He looked at the line. He looked at the way it didn't curve, didn't search, didn't explore. It went directly to Valkyrie space, like they already knew exactly where they were going. Like they had always known. The first transmission arrived 3 weeks after the fleet had emerged from the outer dark. They had reached the edge of Valkyrie space. The fleet had stopped there. stopped exactly at the border, not 1 meter past it, and held position for 6 hours. They were not drifting. They were holding with the kind of precision that required active effort and clear intention. Then the transmission arrived. Text only. No voice, no visual, no identification codes, no diplomatic headers. None of the standard opening protocols the galactic community had used for 4 centuries of interspecies contact. Just text in a dialect of old Velkari script, so archaic that the translation systems needed 11 minutes to read it. We are here to settle accounts. Please advise where you would like us to begin. The chamber read it in silence. Oren read it twice, then a third time. Drevin read it and said, "Accounts? What accounts?" Nobody answered him. Oren was looking at the transmission's timestamp, then looking at the fleet's position, held patient and exact at the Velkari border. He was thinking about the old Velkari dialect, about how old it actually was, about how whoever sent that message had not written it just now. They had not looked up old words in a translation file in the moment. Someone had written that message a long time ago, had kept it, had carried it across 3 centuries of dark space, and had sent it the instant the moment was right, not before, not after. The patience behind that hit Oren like something physical. He sat down slowly. "Who are they?" Draven said again. His voice carried something new in it that he was working to keep out, something that was not quite the same as his earlier certainty. On the screen, the fleet waited. The answer did not come from the Council's analysts. It did not come from the Dominion's intelligence division, which had been working for 3 weeks and was very quietly not finding anything. It came from the Velkari archives, a young archivist on the night rotation, assigned to cross-reference the old dialect transmission with historical records. She found it in under 40 minutes. Found it in a record so old that it had been stored in physical format and only partially transferred to the digital system. A harbor manifest, 300 years old. It listed names and numbers and the condition of each group that had arrived on that flat plain at the edge of the third continent. Species human, number of individuals, 40,247. Condition critical. Notes, survivors of systematic extermination campaign conducted by the Keth Dominion fleet. Requesting sanctuary. Sanctuary granted. The archivist sat with this for a moment. Then she sent it up the chain as fast as she could. The chamber, when the information arrived, made a sound Oren had never heard from it before. It was not shouting. It was not the noise of debate. It was lower than that, more fundamental. The sound a room makes when everyone in it is recalculating the same thing at the same time and arriving at the same answer. Humans. Oren knew the history. Everyone knew the history. The way people know about things that happened long before they were born and far from anything that touched them directly. The Keth Dominion had moved against humanity 3 centuries ago, a small species on a small cluster of worlds. Not powerful, not considered important, deemed an obstacle to Dominion expansion plans. The campaign had been efficient. The worlds were taken. The people were gone. That was the word the histories used. Not dead, not destroyed, gone. Into the deep dark. The Dominion had not sent ships after them into unmapped space. It had not been worth the fuel. That was the official history. 3 centuries. Oren looked at the fleet on the screen, 4,000 ships and more. The instruments still could not get a firm count. He thought about what 40,000 people became in 300 years if they were committed enough, if they were patient enough, if they had nothing else to do and every reason to do it. He looked at the blank readout where the 7th Armada's signals used to be. He thought he was beginning to understand several things he had not understood before. On the Velkari homeworld in a government ministry building that everyone else had quietly left, Elder Marathane sat at her monitoring station and watched the fleet approach on a screen that was older than most of the junior staff had ever been alive. She was very old, old enough to remember when the ministry building had been full of people working, before the Dominion's long years of pressure, old enough to have grown up with the harbor stories as her inheritance. She called it the harbor in her own mind, though it had not really been one. There was no water. It was a flat plain at the edge of the third continent, and 300 years ago, long before Mara was born, it had been covered in ships. Broken ships, leaking ships, ships held together with emergency sealant and something that was not quite hope anymore. And the people who came out of them had been hollow-eyed and shaking, and there had been so many children, 40,000 of them altogether, the last of a species. Mara had not been there herself. She was born generations after the harbor closed. But her grandmother had been there, had witnessed it as a young woman, had passed the stories down through the family. And 300 years ago, generations before Mara was born, it had been covered in ships. Young then, a junior aide in the medical ministry, her grandmother had carried blankets to the harbor every morning for 6 months and had never once felt like she was doing enough. She had told Mara the stories so many times that Mara could see them, could feel them, as if she had lived them herself, because there was nothing you could do that would be enough for 40,000 people who had lost everything. The Dominion had come afterward, angry that the Valkyrie had helped. The Valkyrie had paid for what they did, had spent a century paying in slow and deliberate ways. Trade restrictions, resource quotas, the quiet strangling of a civilization that had made the wrong choice as the Dominion defined wrong. The Valkyrie had never said it was the wrong choice. Now Mara sat in the empty ministry and watched the fleet that was coming from the direction those broken ships had gone. Her hands were very still on the desk. She was trying to understand what she was feeling. It was not fear, she knew fear. She had felt it many times during the Dominion years. This was something older than fear, something that existed before the word did. The fleet moved on the screen, patient, vast. She did not try to name the feeling, she just sat with it. The transmission came through on the old emergency channel, the one that had not been used in 200 years, the one that still existed in the system because no one had bothered to remove it. The text appeared in the dialect her grandmother had taught her, the same dialect her grandmother had used to tell the harbor stories. Words Mara had not used in 40 years because no one spoke them anymore except to remember. We are here to settle accounts. Please advise where you would like us to begin. Mara read it 3 times. She thought about the harbor, about the stories her grandmother told her, about 6 months of morning walks across a flat plain, carrying blankets that were never enough, about a small boy who had pressed his face into her grandmother's shoulder and held on with both hands and said nothing at all because there were no words for what had happened to him. She thought about what her people had paid for doing what they did. She thought about what it must have felt like. 40,000 people getting back onto their damaged ships and going into the dark, leaving the only friends they had in the entire galaxy, not knowing if they would ever come back, not knowing if the people they left behind would survive the Dominion's anger, carrying that uncertainty with them into the unmapped dark. She thought about what you hold on to when you carry something like that. She looked at her screen. 4,000 ships. The first thing they did when they came back was write in her people's oldest language and ask where she wanted them to begin. The feeling she had been carrying since the fleet appeared finally had a clear shape. It was not fear, it was not wonder, it was the specific feeling of someone whose family had made a choice long ago without knowing if it mattered, whose grandmother had made that choice and passed the weight of not knowing down through generations. And then one quiet evening, Mara, carrying that inherited uncertainty, received the answer. Mara pressed the reply key. She typed in the old dialect her grandmother had taught her, in words she had not used in 40 years. Begin here. She sent it. She sat back. She was crying. She did not know when she had started. She did not try to stop. Outside the city continued its ordinary evening, unaware that in a quiet ministry office an old woman had just answered a question that had been waiting 300 years for someone to ask it. The fleet received her message. The fleet began to move. And across the galaxy, in council chambers and military command centers and monitoring stations, people watched the numbers on their screens and understood that something had just changed. Something fundamental. Something that could not be undone. The ships moved toward Valkyrie space. Not as invaders, not as conquerors, as something the galaxy had no word for yet. The shuttle Orin took to the human flagship was small, standard diplomatic issue. The kind of craft designed to look unthreatening and neutral. It had comfortable seats, a small refreshment unit, and windows along the side that now showed him something his brain kept refusing to fully process. The fleet. He had seen the numbers, had stared at instruments for 3 weeks, had heard analysts read out figures that had no historical comparison. But numbers on a screen were one thing. This was something else entirely. The ships went in every direction he looked, not clustered, not crowded, organized. Each one placed with a clear purpose. The way a city is organized, where the placement of each building makes sense once you understand what the city is for, and they were not uniform. Some were enormous, the kind of scale that made the shuttle feel like an insect. Some were smaller, faster looking, built for different work. Some had shapes he did not recognize at all. Designs that did not match any template in the council's records. Built from 300 years of engineering he had never seen and could not evaluate. He sat at the window and watched them pass for 20 minutes and did not reach the end of the fleet. His aide, Cassian Holt, sat beside him and said nothing. Cassian was usually very good at saying things. Orrin appreciated the silence. The flagship was not the largest ship in the fleet. That surprised him. It was large. It dwarfed the shuttle without trying, but it was not the biggest. And it had no obvious weapons visible on its exterior, which he found more unsettling than weapons would have been. A ship that showed its weapons was making a statement. A ship that didn't was not interested in statements. It was simply a ship that had come here to do something and did not need to prove anything to anyone. The docking process was smooth and automatic. The airlock opened. There was a human there waiting, a young woman in a plain gray uniform who said nothing dramatic and made no particular event of the moment, who simply said, in the common tongue with a slight and unfamiliar accent, "Delegate Vassar, the Admiral will see you now." Just like that. The room they brought him to had no windows. Orrin had expected a command center, a war room, screens and maps and the visible machinery of a 4,000-ship fleet, something designed to impress and to show power. It was a plain room, a table, 2 chairs, lighting that was warm rather than harsh. There was a small machine on a side counter, making something that steamed gently and smelled like nothing he recognized, but in a way that was not unpleasant. Admiral Saren Vale was already sitting at the table. She was not what he expected. He was not sure afterward what he had expected. Something harder, maybe. Something that looked like 300 years of building toward a single moment. She looked like someone who had been awake for a while but was not tired. She was calm in the way that people were calm when they had moved past the part where calm required effort. She stood briefly when he entered. He did not expect that. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Delegate," she said. "Sit, please." She poured 2 cups of the steaming thing from the machine and set one in front of him. "You don't have to drink it," she said. "I don't know if it suits your biology, but it's warm and this is a first meeting, and it seemed appropriate." Orrin sat. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. "Admiral," he said, "I represent the Galactic Council. You need to ask a lot of things," she said, not unkindly. "You've been trying to reach us for 3 weeks." "You did not respond." "No," she said. "Why not?" She considered this. It did not seem like a difficult question for her, just one she was deciding how much to answer. "We had nothing to say to the council yet," she said. "We had something to say to the Valkyrie. We said it, they answered, then we were ready." "Ready for what?" She reached under the table and placed an object between them. A ledger. Physical, bound in something dark and slightly worn at the corners. The way things got worn from being handled regularly over a long time. It sat on the table between them, and it was the most ordinary-looking object in the room and somehow the most important. Orrin looked at it. "What is that?" he said. "An accounting," she said, "of everything." She did not open it immediately. She drank from her cup and let him look at the ledger. He did not touch it. He was not sure he wanted to. "Every species in the council has an entry," she said. "Every interaction our people had with every species, going back to first contact and forward through today. Every kindness, every harm, every trade agreement, honored or broken, every refugee taken in or turned away, every ship that helped and every ship that fired." She said it the way someone states a fact about the weather. Not proudly, not threateningly, just cleanly. "You have been watching for 300 years, Orrin said. "We have been recording," she said. "Watching suggests we were hidden. We were not hiding. We were in the unmapped dark doing what our people have always done. Surviving, building, making something from nothing, and recording. You sent observers. Long-range, patient. It is not difficult to gather information about people who do not believe you exist, and therefore do not bother to conceal themselves from you." Orrin thought about that. He thought about the last 300 years of galactic history, all of it proceeding normally. No one thinking about the 40,000 people who had gone into the dark. All of the conversations and decisions and cruelties and kindnesses that had happened in open sight, in ships and stations and council chambers. While somewhere in the unmapped dark someone was writing it all down, he felt the particular uncomfortable feeling of someone who has been observed without knowing it. "The Valkyrie entry," he said. "What does it say?" She opened the ledger to the first page. He looked at the Valkyrie entry. He could not read human notation, but the structure was clear. A column of figures, entries, dates stretching across the page. At the bottom of the column was a number. Large. Very large. 40,000 people, she said. Shelter for 6 months in conditions that cost your people significantly. Resistance to dominion, pressure at personal cost to the Valkyrie government. Medical care. Food stores, material given freely. Then the accumulated cost to the Valkyrie people over the following century. The trade restrictions. The resource extraction. The systematic economic damage the Dominion imposed as punishment for what the Valkyrie did. She turned the page. We include that, she said, what it cost them to help us, what they lost because they helped us. That is part of the debt. Orrin was quiet. You include what was done to them because of you, he said. If you shelter someone and they bring you harm in doing it, she said, and you knew that was possible and did it anyway, then the harm is part of what they gave. Yes. Orrin sat with that for a long moment. The Valkyrie entry is at the front, he said. Yes, she said, because they are first. Because everything else in this ledger comes after them. Everything we built because of 6 months on a flat plane at the edge of their third continent. That is the first entry because it is the foundation of all the others. The room was quiet. Orrin picked up his cup and drank from it. It was warm and slightly bitter and not bad at all. What does the council's entry say? He asked. She turned several pages and found it without hesitation. He looked at the numbers. He could not read them, but the column was not as long as the Valkyrie entry. It was not deep red, which he had begun to suspect might indicate debt, but it was not empty either. Modest positive, she said. The council provided passage to several human refugee ships in the early years before the Dominion made its position clear. After that, the council stopped providing passage. The Dominion pressured. I know why. It is still in the ledger. He nodded. That was fair, and he knew it was fair. You are not here to harm the council, he said. We are not here to harm anyone, she said. We are here to settle accounts. Those are very different things. And the Keth Dominion's entry, she did not turn to it immediately. She looked at him steadily. The Dominion's entry, she said, is in the back. She picked up her cup. There is a reason we put it in the back, she said. Orrin thought about the 7th Armada, about the blank readout, about 41 ships in complete clean silence. He did not ask her to turn to the back. I want to be clear about something, she said. We did not come here to fight. We have not been preparing for a war. Orrin looked at the fleet visible in every direction outside the ship. She understood what his silence meant. We prepared for the possibility of a war, she said, if someone chose to start one with us. That preparation took the same amount of time and resources as what we actually came here to do, which is settle accounts. The difference is that what we actually came here to do is almost finished. Almost, Orrin said. The repayment is large, she said. It will take time to deliver properly. We want it done correctly. She leaned forward slightly. Would you like to see what happened to the 7th Armada? She said. Orrin's throat was very dry. Yes, he said. She stood, walked to the wall, pressed something. The wall became a screen, and Orrin saw. 3 weeks earlier, the sheer corridor. The view was from above, from one of the human ships hidden in the asteroid field. The recording quality was perfect, every detail sharp and clear. 41 Keth warships in attack formation, weapons active, energy signatures blazing across the instruments. The kind of force that could reduce a colony to ash in under an hour, and one human ship, medium-sized, no visible weapons, holding position in the center of the corridor, not running, not signaling, just waiting. The Keth hailed, no response. Commander Victor Thane gave the order. 6 ships opened fire. Orrin watched the energy beams lance across space, watched them converge on the human vessel, and watched something happen that should not have been possible. The human ship's hull shimmered, rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. The energy beams hit and scattered, not reflected, not absorbed, redistributed across the surface in patterns that looked almost organic. The human ship's shields were at 87%, after 2 full minutes of sustained bombardment from 6 warships designed to break planetary defenses. 87%. Victor gave another order. 6 ships broke formation. Ramming speed. The human ship did not move. And then it did something. Orrin could not see the weapon, could not see it fire. What he saw was the result. All 6 Keth ships went dark, simultaneously. Every system, every backup, every emergency protocol, dead in space. 11 seconds. Electromagnetic pulse cascade, Saren said quietly beside him. Precisely calibrated to Keth power core frequencies. It does not destroy, it disables. The crews were unharmed. Their ships were not. On the screen, the remaining 35 Keith warships tried to retreat, and 18 human ships decloaked from the asteroid field around them. Not appearing, decloaking. They had been there the entire time, watching, waiting for the Keth to make the choice they knew the Keth would make. The human ships did not fire, they simply moved into position, surrounding, containing. A voice came through, the same voice that had spoken on all 41 Keth displays. You chose to attack. You do not get to choose to leave. The recording showed what happened next in precise clinical detail. The Keth ships tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, ramming attempts, every tactic in their considerable military doctrine. Nothing worked. The human ships moved with a coordination that looked choreographed, like they had practiced this exact scenario 1,000 times. Maybe they had. One by one, the Keth warships were disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Engines neutralized, weapons offline, shields collapsed. But hulls intact, crews alive. It took 47 minutes. When it was over, 41 Keth warships drifted in the corridor. Empty, silent. Their crews transported to detention facilities on the human ships. Not one casualty, not one death. The recording ended. Oren sat in the quiet room and tried to make his mind accept what his eyes had just shown him. We have been watching you for 300 years, Saren said. She said it again. This time it meant something different. Did you think we came unprepared? The crews, Oren said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. What happened to them? They were held for 72 hours, fed, provided medical care, interviewed, then returned to Keth space in their own shuttles. The ships remained in our possession. Why, because the ships were the instruments of the attack, she said. The people were following orders. We do not punish people for following orders unless those orders involve deliberate atrocity. Commander Thane followed military protocol. He made a tactical decision based on incomplete information. That is not a crime. That is command. She walked back to the table, sat down, opened the ledger to a page near the back. His entry, she said, reflects what happened. The attack, the capture, the treatment in detention, the return. It is logged, it is complete, it is settled. And Chancellor Cross, his entry, she said, is not settled. She closed the ledger. The meeting is over, Delegate Vassar. You have what you came for. You understand what we are and what we are doing. You may report this to the council. Oren stood. His legs felt uncertain beneath him. What happens now, he said. Saren looked at him with those calm, ancient eyes. Now, she said, we do what we came here to do. The freighters arrived the next morning, not warships. The distinction was clear, even from orbit. Built wide and heavy rather than lean. Built for carrying rather than fighting. Hundreds of them, moving in a slow and coordinated line across the Valkyrie sky, holding formation with such easy precision that they looked like a single thing rather than many. On the Valkyrie homeworld, Mara stood at the window of the ministry building and watched them come in through the atmosphere. The younger government officials were gathered in the main hall, speaking to each other in low voices, doing the organizational work of receiving something this large and unexpected. There were protocols being written on the spot, comm channels being opened and closed, the particular organized noise of a bureaucracy trying to adapt quickly to something it had not prepared for. Mara was not in the main hall. She was at the window. The freighters were descending now, spreading out over the landscape, each one moving to a specific position with a kind of deliberate placement that told her they already knew where they were going, not searching, not circling, each ship going to a specific place that someone had chosen in advance. She thought about the harbor again, about ships arriving on a flat plain, her grandmother's ships. These were different ships, different people, different moment. The same thread, though, the same line running from her grandmother's hands to hers, 300 years long. And she was standing at the end her grandmother never lived to see. She put her hand on the window glass. Outside, the freighters descended. The first thing they did was maps. Human engineers arrived at the Valkyrie government offices with physical map documents, printed, detailed, showing the entire planet in sections, and spent 3 hours with the government's infrastructure coordinators going over every marked location. The marked locations were where things would go. Captain Jace Theron was very young, 28, younger than Mara's grandchildren. He had a scar along the side of his jaw, and he spoke with his hands a great deal. He was explaining the water system, not a water system that the Valkyrie would have to build themselves, a complete water reclamation system, the components for which were already on the freighters, already being positioned, ready for installation beginning the next morning. He explained how long it would take. He explained the maintenance requirements. He explained what the system would produce. He said the water output numbers. And one of the coordinators put her pen down on the table. "That's 3 times what we have now," she said. "Yes," Jace said. "We have been on rationing protocols for 40 years. "We know," he said. "The rationing protocols are in the plan. The new system is calibrated to address the deficit that was created during the Dominion restriction years and to provide sufficient surplus to prevent future rationing under normal conditions." The coordinator stared at him. "You calculated our rationing deficit," she said. "We calculated what was taken, my boss," he said. "The water system is part of what was taken. We are returning it." The coordinator looked at the map, at the points marked in red where the components would go, at the web of lines connecting them. She looked back at Jace. She did not say anything, but something in her face did. Jace understood what it meant. He gave her a small, plain nod. Then he pointed to the next item on the map and continued explaining. Across the galaxy in council chambers and monitoring stations and military command centers, people received the same transmission at the same moment. The ledger was public, not a summary, not a statement about it. The actual contents. Every entry, every species, every column of numbers, every calculated figure, released simultaneously to every species in the Galactic Assembly, delivered in each species' own language, formatted clearly, organized by species, the methodology explained in plain language at the top so that the numbers could be verified by anyone who wanted to check the work. There was no accompanying statement, no declaration, no demands, no deadline, just the ledger, delivered to everyone at the same time, with the clean, quiet implication that everyone could now see their own number and everyone else's and draw their own conclusions. Orin read through his own species entry. It was not long, it was accurate. He recognized several of the entries, specific decisions, specific moments he had been present for or had read about in his own government's records. They were listed without editorializing, without weight given to the politics around them, simply as actions taken or not taken. He looked at the total, modest positive, slightly better than he had expected. His own world had apparently quietly done a few things right over the years that were in the ledger and not in their own official histories. He sat with that for a moment, the strange experience of being seen more completely than you knew. He thought about every other species representative on this station reading their own entry at the same moment. He thought about the private calculations being done in offices all across the council. He thought about what it meant to have your history summarized by someone who had no political reason to soften it. His comm system began making noise, every channel simultaneously. He let it make noise for a while and finished reading before he started answering. On a medical research station in Haan space, Dr. Andon Vale opened a data package that had been delivered that morning. It was 300 years of human pharmaceutical research, biology, chemistry, disease treatment, genetic medicine, everything they had developed in isolation, translated into Heian notation and organized clearly for easy use. Not a promise of future sharing, not a trade proposal. Delivered complete, without conditions. Andon had spent 40 years working on 3 specific diseases that had resisted every treatment his people had tried. He found in the package not just leads, but complete solutions. Not partial solutions, complete ones, worked out in full. He started crying at his desk. His assistant asked if he was all right. He could not explain quickly enough what he was looking at. So he just said, "We have been trying to solve this for 40 years. And his assistant said, "And they solved it. 30 years ago," he said, "and they brought us the answer." The assistant looked at the screen. "Why, Kesime," she said. Annan thought about the story his grandfather had told him, about a damaged ship and 11 people, and a decision to help that had seemed very ordinary at the time. "Because 40 years ago we did something small," he said, "and apparently they do not consider small things unimportant." The broadcast reached the Galactic Council's main information network within 2 hours. Within 4 hours, it had been picked up by every major news service in the Assembly. The image everyone knew was Dr. Andon Vale finishing his brief statement and then just standing there, breathing. And you could see in his face what it felt like to have 40 years of work resolved in a single morning because someone somewhere had written down a small act of kindness and never let it go. He wasn't performing anything. He was just standing there feeling it. The entire galaxy watched him feel it. And in a detention cell that was not really a cell, Chancellor Dravencross sat on a bench that was more comfortable than it had any right to be, and read his own entry in the ledger on a screen they had given him. It was long, he did not read all of it. He had grown up in the Dominion's administrative class. He knew enough of the history to understand the general shape of what the numbers meant. He looked at the total at the bottom of the Dominion's entry. He sat with it for a long time. Outside his window, human ships moved through the dark, patient, organized, doing work he could not see but could feel approaching, like a tide, like something that had been coming for 300 years and would not be stopped now. He thought about 41 ships that had vanished in 12 minutes and 17 seconds. He thought about a ledger that had been kept for 3 centuries by people who did not forget and did not forgive in the way that word was usually understood. They did something else, something the galaxy had no category for. They remembered, they calculated, they returned. And Cross, who had been chancellor for 20 years and had never met a problem he could not eventually dominate, understood, for the first time in his life, what it meant to be held accountable by someone who kept better records than you did. The screen in front of him showed one line at the bottom of the Dominion entry, status settlement pending. He stared at those 2 words for a very long time and wondered what they would cost. The Keth main fleet arrived 6 days after the ledger went public, 847 warships, the largest military force the Dominion had deployed in 60 years. Not sent to negotiate, not sent to observe, sent to reclaim what Chancellor Cross called Dominion territorial interests in the Valkyrie sector. The official transmission said nothing about the freighters, nothing about the water systems being installed, or the medical facilities opening, or the schools being built in districts that had been rubble for a century. It said, withdraw immediately or face consequences. 127 human warships moved to intercept. The ratio was 6.7 to 1. Oren watched it happen from the Council monitoring station. Watch the tactical display show the 2 fleets converging at the edge of Valkyrie orbit. Watch the numbers that should have meant inevitable human defeat. Cassian stood beside him, young, terrified, trying not to show it. They're outnumbered, Cassian said quietly. Oren thought about a ledger with worn corners, about 300 years of watching and recording and calculating, about 18 ships that had waited hidden in an asteroid field, while 41 Keth warships walked into a trap they didn't know existed. Are they, he said. The fleets met. The Keth Armada opened with everything. 2,300 missiles launched simultaneously. The kind of opening salvo designed to overwhelm any possible defense through sheer volume. Enough firepower to sterilize a moon. The human ships did not scatter, did not run, did not attempt evasive maneuvers. They moved together. 127 vessels sliding into formation with a precision that looked like choreography, like a single organism rather than separate ships. And as they moved, something happened that the Keth tactical officers would spend years trying to understand. The shields linked, not merged, not overlapped, linked. 127 individual defensive fields becoming a single continuous sphere, a shell of energy half a kilometer thick surrounding the entire formation. The missiles hit. The display showed impact signatures across the entire shield surface, detonations that should have penetrated, should have broken through, should have done something. The shield held at 91%, 4 minutes of sustained bombardment, 2,300 warheads, 91%. Then the human ships fired back. Not missiles, not energy beams, something else. Oren had seen railgun technology before, mass accelerators, kinetic weapons. They were old tech, reliable but limited. You could see them coming, could intercept them, could armor against them. These were not those. The human railguns fired at a velocity that made the projectiles nearly invisible. Hypersonic tungsten penetrators the size of a human fist, moving at 37 kilometers per second, guided by targeting systems that had been watching Keth ship movements for 300 years. The projectiles did not hit hulls, did not aim for crew compartments, did not target life support. They hit engines, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. 89 Keth warships went dead in space. Engines destroyed, navigation offline. Weapons still functional, but unable to maneuver, unable to pursue, unable to do anything but drift, and every crew member alive, unharmed, intact. The Keth Fleet Commander Admiral Torvin Kell, 58 years old, 34 years of service, stared at his tactical display and tried to make it make sense. He had just lost nearly 1/10 of his fleet and no one had died. All ships, he said. His voice was steady, years of training holding it there. Energy weapons, full spread, Target the sphere. Concentrate fire. 632 warships opened up with directed energy beams, the kind that could cut through station armor in seconds, focused on a single point in the human shield wall. The shield shimmered, analyzed, adapted. The energy scattered across the surface like light through a prism, redistributed, rendered harmless. The shield integrity read 93%, higher than before. The more you shoot, Saren's voice came across every Keth channel simultaneously, the harder it gets to break. Torvin's hands were very still on his command console. "Who are you?" he said. "We are the ones who kept records," Saren said. The human formation shifted, still linked, still coordinated, and began systematic work. Not an attack, work. The railguns fired again, and again, and again. Each shot precisely calculated, each targeting a specific system on a specific ship. Engines, weapons arrays, shield generators, communication relays. Never crew quarters, never life support, never anything that would cause casualties. Surgical, clinical, inevitable. Torvin watched his fleet come apart around him, watched ship after ship go dark, watched the numbers on his display drop. 412 disabled, 435 still fighting, and the human ships hadn't taken a single hit that mattered. "All vessels," he said, "new orders." He looked at the Valkyrie homeworld on his display. Civilian, undefended, the thing the humans were here to protect. 67 ships, break formation, target the planet, make them choose. It was not honor. It was not noble. It was the last card he had to play. 67 warships peeled away from the main fleet, weapons charging, targeting solutions locking onto population centers. The human ships did not react. For 11 seconds, they did nothing at all. Then Saren's voice came again, quieter this time, almost gentle. "I strongly advise against that." And the stars changed. Not all at once. Gradually, like a curtain being pulled back. Ships decloaking throughout the system. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. Appearing from behind moons and inside debris fields, and in high orbit, and in low orbit, and in every possible position that could provide tactical advantage. 890 ships. Nearly double the size of the Keth fleet that had seemed so overwhelming minutes ago. They had been there the entire time, watching, waiting, letting the Keth commit, letting them make choices, letting them show what they would do when they thought they had the upper hand, recording it all. "This is 22% of our fleet," Saren said. "Would you like to see the rest?" Torvin sat in his command chair and felt something he had not felt in 34 years of military service. He felt small. 67 ships, Saren said, currently targeting Valkyrie civilian centers. "You have 30 seconds to reverse that order before we make the decision for you, your choice." Torvin closed his eyes. "All ships," he said, "stand down, return to formation." "No," Saren said. Torvin opened his eyes. "No, you will not return to formation," she said. "You will withdraw. You will return to Keth space. You will report what happened here, and you will wait for further communication." "We surrender," Torvin said. "No," Saren said again. "Surrender implies you had something we wanted, Ed. You do not. You will withdraw. Your ships will be permitted to leave. Your crews are alive because we chose that, remember it." The channel went silent. Torvin looked at his tactical officer. Young, barely 30, looking to him for orders that would make sense of this. "Signal the fleet," Torvin said. "We are leaving." The withdrawal took 42 minutes, not because of distance, because the human ships insisted on escorting every single Keth vessel to the system boundary, making sure they left, making sure everyone understood who was in control. Not one shot fired during the withdrawal, not one hostile action, just patient, inexorable guidance toward the edge of the system in the dark beyond. When the last Keth ship crossed the boundary, the human escort vessels held position for 17 minutes, watching, waiting to see if anyone would try to come back. No one did. The battle was over. 13 minutes of actual combat, 0 casualties on either side, 1 fleet disabled, 1 fleet intact, 1 message delivered so clearly that even the Council's most optimistic analysts understood it. Humanity had not come to fight. They had come to finish something, and they would not be stopped. Oren stood at his monitoring station and looked at the aftermath displayed across a dozen screens. Cassian was crying, quietly, the way young people cry when they've just seen something that changes how they understand the world. Oren put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" he said. "They could have destroyed them. Kishan said. All of them. They could have killed everyone. Yes, Oren said, but they didn't. No. Keshin looked at him, eyes red, trying to understand. What are they? He said. Oren thought about that for a long time. They are what happens, he said finally, when you give the kindest people you've ever met 300 years to get ready. The settlement of Keth began 3 days later. Not with Valians, not with invasion, with evacuation. Human transport ships appeared in orbit around the 3 primary Keth homeworlds. Massive vessels, built for one purpose, the relocation of populations. The announcement came simultaneously to every Keth citizen in the core systems. You have 72 hours to prepare for transport. Bring personal possessions, family records, cultural artifacts, anything that matters. You will be relocated to colony worlds in the outer territories. Your lives will continue. Your people will survive. But the apparatus that enabled systematic harm will not. 1.4 million people, 3 worlds, 72 hours. The broadcast showed it happening in real time. Human personnel working alongside Keth civilians, helping them pack, helping them organize, treating them not as conquered enemies, but as people who needed to move and needed help moving. No one was harmed. No one was separated from family. No one's possessions were confiscated. It was the most courteous dismantling of a civilization anyone had ever seen. And when the populations were safely relocated, the human ships did something else. They took apart the infrastructure. Not destroyed, dismantled. Industrial centers deconstructed. Military production facilities carefully disabled and repurposed. Administrative buildings emptied and sealed. The entire mechanism that had enabled the Dominion to function as an aggressive expansionist power, methodically, patiently removed. The 3 homeworlds were left intact, habitable, empty, beautiful in the way abandoned places are beautiful when nature has the chance to reclaim them. And across the galaxy, species that had entries in the ledger marked negative watched and understood that the bill was coming, that it would be precise, that it would be fair, that fairness did not mean painless. On a colony world called New Terrace in a small apartment that overlooked an unremarkable city, a young woman named Lyra Cross watched the broadcasts. She was 23. She worked in a records office under the name Lyra Rivers, had done so for 3 years, building a quiet life, trying to be something other than her grandfather's legacy. She had written a message 3 weeks ago, had sent it to the Human Fleet communication channel. One question: what happens to negative numbers? The response had come yesterday, an invitation to meet. The station was neutral, small, a transit point, the kind of place where people passed through rather than stayed. Admiral Saren Vale was waiting in a viewing lounge. Alone, no security, no delegation. Just a woman sitting at a table with 2 cups of something warm. Lyra sat down across from her. You're not the Dominion, Saren said. Lyra had prepared several responses, several ways to defend herself or explain herself or make her case. My name is, she started. I know your name, Sharon said. Both of them. Lyra was quiet. You are not the Dominion, Sharon said again. Softer, not as a political statement, as a simple observation. But the ledger, Lyra said. My grandfather, your grandfather's entry is closed, Sharon said. The Dominion's entry is closed. The account is settled. And the people, the Keth people who had nothing to do with. The settlement was not designed to distinguish, Sharon said. The Dominion as an entity has a closed account. The people who came from it are individuals. Individuals have their own entries. She looked at Lyra steadily. Your entry is not your grandfather's entry. Lyra felt something in her chest that might have been hope or might have been something she didn't have a word for yet. What is my entry? She said. 3 years, Saren said. You have been building something different for 3 years under a different name in a records office doing ordinary work. There are people in your building who know you by your ordinary name and think of you as someone who keeps good records and is reliable and brings food to share sometimes. Lyra stared at her. How do you? We have been watching for 300 years, Saren said. Not unkindly, just factually. Did you think we only watch the powerful? She leaned forward slightly. You asked a simple question. What happens to negative numbers? Lyra waited. Numbers change, Saren said. She said it plainly, without comfort built into it, without the softness people put around things to make them easier to hold, just the flat truth of it. The ledger is a living document. New entries go in every day. Old entries are updated when circumstances change. The ledger is not a sentence, it is a record. Lyra sat with this. It was the least reassuring reassurance she had ever received. It gave her no promise, made no guarantee. It also did not close a door. "Why did you agree to meet with me?" Lyra asked. Saren stood, prepared to leave. "Because you asked," she said. "You asked honestly. You asked because you needed to know the answer, not because you wanted to negotiate or make a case or get something. You just needed to know." She looked at Lyra one more time. "We always answer honest questions when we can." Lyra sat in the viewing lounge for a long time after Saren left, looking out the window at the ordinary stars, thinking about her records office, about 3 years of building something small and unremarkable. Numbers change. She picked up her bag and walked to the transit desk to book her way home. On Valkyrie, the restoration was complete. Not finished. It would take years for everything to fully integrate, but complete in the sense that what had been promised was now delivered. The water systems were online, producing 3 times the previous output, enough to end 40 years of rationing and begin filling the reservoirs that the Dominion years had drained. The medical facilities were staffed, using technology that Valkyrie doctors were still learning to understand, technology that would save lives that would have been lost. The terraforming arrays had turned 12,000 square kilometers of damaged land into viable agricultural space. Crops were already seeded, growing in soil that read better than any optimistic projection. And in a district of the capital city that had been bombed during the worst years, a school stood where rubble had been. Mara walked to it on the morning of its opening. She was 83. Her body hurt in the ways that old bodies hurt. But she walked the distance because some things you walk to, some things you didn't arrive at in a transport. The school was small, sized correctly for a neighborhood school, rooms for children, a space outside for them to move around in. Above the entrance, a plaque in old Valkyrie script, "From the children of the 40,000. Mara stood in front of it for a long time. She reached out and touched it with 2 fingers. Very briefly. She thought about the stories that had shaped her life, about broken ships on a flat plane, about her grandmother's 6 months of morning walks carrying blankets that were never enough, about a small boy who had held on to her grandmother and said nothing because there were no words. She thought about 300 years, about what those 40,000 people had become, about what they had built in the dark, about how the first thing they did when they came back was ask where to begin. She thought about the plaque, about children now who would learn in this building, who would see those words every day, who would grow up knowing that kindness returned is not the same as kindness remembered, but that both matter. She was crying. She didn't try to stop. Behind her, children were arriving, parents walking them to their first day, normal, ordinary, the kind of morning that happened because someone 300 years ago had made a choice and someone else had never forgotten it. Mara turned and walked home through a city that was different than it had been 2 months ago. That would be more different in another 2 months. That would continue changing until it looked like what it should have always been allowed to look like. She felt something that took her a while to name. It was not relief, not gratitude exactly. It was the feeling of a debt being paid that her family had stopped believing would ever be paid. The feeling of being seen, of being remembered, of learning that the choice her grandmother made when she was 23 years old, the choice that defined Mara's entire life, mattered to someone enough that they spent 300 years figuring out how to say thank you properly. She walked home crying and did not care who saw. Orin stood at the viewport in his quarters that evening. The human fleet had redistributed, not concentrated anymore, spread throughout the system, throughout adjacent systems, present but not invasive, integrated into the space like they belonged there. The council had sent a formal integration proposal that morning. Full membership, seats, representation, rights, and obligations. The human response had been, "The proposal has been received. We will consider it." Cassian had asked him what that meant. Orin had said, "It means they don't need us yet. They will join when joining serves their purpose, not ours." "Will they stay," Cassian had asked, "permanently in galactic space?" Orin had looked at the ships distributed across the starfield. He had thought about a harbor manifest 300 years old, about sanctuary granted. "They never left," he had said. Now he stood at the viewport alone, thinking about everything that had happened, about a ledger with worn corners, about Admiral Saren Vale pouring tea, about Mara touching a plaque with 2 fingers, about Lyra asking what happens to negative numbers. He thought about the galaxy before 3 weeks ago, comfortable in its assumptions, certain of its power structures, operating under rules that everyone understood. And he thought about what had changed, not the balance of power, That was obvious. Anyone could see that humanity could destroy any fleet in the galaxy if they chose to. What had changed was something deeper. The galaxy had learned that there were people who kept promises across 300 years, who remembered small kindnesses and large cruelties with equal precision, who returned with overwhelming force and chose restraint, who could annihilate and instead repaired. The galaxy had learned that mercy, when it keeps records and does mathematics and builds for 3 centuries, becomes something that has no opposite. It becomes inevitable. Orin thought about a question someone had asked him 3 weeks ago. Cassian, young and terrified and trying to understand. What are they? And Orin had not known how to answer then. But he thought he knew now. They were not conquerors, not saviors, not angels or demons, or any simple category that made the galaxy comfortable. They were accountants. They were people who believed that everything mattered. Every kindness, every cruelty, every choice. Everything recorded, everything remembered, everything eventually settled. They were people who had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to them and used it to build a civilization based on one principle: no debt unpaid, no gift forgotten, no account left open. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Somewhere in the dark between stars, a ledger was being updated. New entries added, old ones marked complete. The work continuing. Patient, precise, eternal. And humanity, who had learned in fire what it meant to be erased, who had survived in darkness, what should have killed them, who had returned with gifts and justice in equal measure, humanity had come home. And the galaxy would never forget the day they did.